Emily had always loved winter. The way the snow blanketed the world, turning everything into a soft, quiet wonderland, made her feel like she was walking through a dream. It was one of those rare afternoons when the sun managed to peek through the gray clouds, casting a soft glow over the landscape. The air was crisp, each breath a reminder of the season's chill. Bundled in her warm red scarf, thick mittens, and cozy boots, she felt invincible as she walked alongside her mother down the narrow trail near their home. "Mom, look at the snowflakes," Emily said, pointing to the flurry of flakes dancing in the breeze. "They're all so different." Her mother smiled but kept walking, her hands tucked into the pockets of her coat. "They sure are, sweetie. You never know just how beautiful the world can be until you take the time to notice it." The walk was a regular part of their routine, a peaceful break from the business of the day. Emily liked to take her time, kicking the snow and imagining that she was a winter explorer, discovering hidden wonders around every corner. Her mother, on the other hand, was often lost in her own thoughts, enjoying the silence that only a snowy afternoon could bring. As they continued down the trail, Emily noticed something odd. It was subtle at first, just a flicker of movement out of the corner of her eye. She stopped and squinted through the trees, her eyes trying to make sense of the strange sight. There, just beyond a thicket of bushes, was a dark shape, barely visible against the white snow. "Mom, do you see that?" Emily asked, tugging at her mother's sleeve. Her mother paused and looked in the direction Emily was pointing. "Maybe it's just a branch or some animal," she said, continuing to walk. But Emily wasn't so sure. Something about the shape didn't sit right with her. It seemed too still, almost lifeless. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she started moving toward it, her boots crunching softly in the snow. "Where are you going, sweetie?" Her mother called after her, but Emily didn't turn back. She was determined to investigate. As she got closer, the shape became clearer. It was a dog, a large one, but it was lying very still, almost as though it was frozen to the ground. The snow around it was disturbed, as if the dog had been struggling or trying to move. It was hard to tell, but Emily could see that the dog's fur was thick and matted with ice. Her heart raced as she took another step closer. "Mom," Emily called again, now a sense of urgency in her voice. "I think it's hurt." Her mother hurried over, her expression quickly changing from calm to concern as she saw the dog. The animal was lying against a tree, shivering violently, its eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. It had clearly been there for a while. Her mother knelt beside the dog, inspecting it carefully. The dog was bound tightly by an old rope, the knots so tight that the fur around its neck had been pulled and twisted. It was clear the dog had been abandoned, left out in the freezing cold with no one to care for it. "Oh no, how could anyone leave him like this?" Emily's mother whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. Emily felt a knot tighten in her chest. The dog's eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, she understood. This was no longer just a walk in the snow. This was the moment where she had to do something. "Mom," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly, "we can't just leave him here. We have to help him." Her mother, still in shock, nodded slowly. "You're right. We'll get in help." But Emily knew that wasn't enough. She had already made up her mind. The dog wasn't going to stay here another minute. Emily's heart raced as she looked at the dog lying before her. The cold winter air felt heavier now, thick with the weight of what she had just discovered. Her hands trembled as she crouched down beside the dog, careful not to startle him. The shepherd's fur, once glossy and thick, was now matted with dirt and ice, the harsh winter winds having taken their toll. The dog's breathing was shallow, his sides rising and falling with effort. He was shivering violently, his body trembling like a leaf in the wind. His eyes, however, were what truly broke Emily's heart. They weren't just eyes filled with fear. They were eyes filled with something more: desperation. There was a silent pleading, a request for help, a cry for mercy in the way he stared at her. For a moment, Emily could do nothing but look back at him, her mind racing. How could anyone do this? How could someone leave a creature out here in this freezing cold, bound like that? Emily felt a surge of anger mixed with sadness. But more than that, she felt something else rising inside her: determination. She couldn't leave him there. She just couldn't. The dog's eyes blinked slowly, and he let out a soft whine. It was a sound of exhaustion, of pain, and yet there was something almost trusting about it. The way his gaze softened when he looked at her made Emily feel like he knew she was here to help him. The connection was instant, and it was as though everything in the world faded away, leaving only Emily and the dog. Her mother, still kneeling beside her, reached for the rope binding the dog's legs to the tree. She tried to undo the knots, but they were tied so tightly that they wouldn't budge. "These knots are old, and this rope is really tough," her mother said, frustration creeping into her voice. "I'm going to need some tools to get this undone. Stay with him, Emily. I'll be right back." Emily nodded, but as her mother stood up and turned to go back to the house, she felt a wave of fear. What if the dog didn't make it? What if he got worse while they were waiting? The thought of him suffering alone was unbearable. She turned back to the dog, gently stroking his head, trying to calm him. "It's okay, boy," she whispered softly, her voice trembling. "We're going to help you. You're not alone anymore." The dog's eyes seemed to soften, and he let out another quiet whimper, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he rested his head on the snow, too exhausted to move, but clearly comforted by her presence. Emily's heart swelled with compassion. She knew they had to get him out of here, fast. She couldn't bear the thought of him staying out in the cold for another moment. As she continued to stroke his fur, she felt a sense of urgency growing inside her. "Please, hold on," she whispered, her voice steady despite the panic rising within her. She wanted to promise the dog everything: safety, warmth, and love. But first, they needed to get him help. Time seemed to stretch in that quiet moment as Emily sat there, her small hands gently pressing against the dog's trembling body. His fur was cold to the touch, but his warmth slowly began to seep into her, giving her the strength to stay calm. She knew, deep down, that she wouldn't leave his side until he was safe. No matter what it took, she would make sure that this dog, this soul who had been left in the cold, would never feel abandoned again. Just then, she heard footsteps crunching in the snow behind her. Her mother had returned, a pair of scissors in hand, ready to cut the rope. The sound of footsteps in the snow was a welcome relief to Emily. She turned her head to see her mother returning, scissors in hand, and her face set with determination. Emily had been holding the dog's head gently, stroking his fur, trying to offer him whatever comfort she could. But she knew they needed to act fast. Every minute the dog was out in the cold felt like a lifetime. Her mother knelt beside her, her hands moving swiftly as she cut through the rope. It was a tough, frayed old cord, but with the scissors in her steady hands, the knots finally gave way. The dog's legs were freed, and Emily let out a relieved breath, though she could see that he still hadn't moved much. His body trembled uncontrollably, the cold having seeped deep into his bones. "All right, sweetie," her mother said softly, her voice reassuring but filled with concern. "We need to get him home now. He's too cold, and we have to warm him up quickly." Emily nodded, still sitting close to the dog. She was careful not to make any sudden movements, knowing the dog was still fragile and likely in pain. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a brief moment, Emily felt a deep connection, a silent understanding between them. It was as if he knew that she wasn't just some stranger, but someone who was going to help him, someone who wouldn't abandon him like others had. She reached out slowly and placed a hand on the dog's back, feeling the ice-cold fur beneath her fingertips. Despite his physical state, there was something in his eyes that calmed her. He wasn't just some random animal. He was someone who had been through something terrible and had survived. Emily could feel the strength in him, even if it was hidden beneath layers of exhaustion and fear. "We've got to move quickly," Emily's mother said, her voice laced with urgency. "Can you help me guide him?" Emily nodded and gently pulled the dog's head into her lap, offering him comfort as best as she could. He winced slightly, as though it hurt to move, but when Emily whispered soft words of reassurance, he seemed to relax a little. His breathing was still shallow, but he didn't pull away. Emily could feel the weight of his body as she carefully helped him rise to his feet. The dog wobbled, his legs shaky and uncertain, but he managed to stay standing. It was clear that he was weak, but Emily could see the spark of determination in his eyes. He wanted to keep going. Her heart swelled with admiration for the dog. Despite everything he had endured, he was still trying, still fighting. "We're almost there. Brave," Emily whispered, as though the dog could understand her every word. She had named him in that moment, the name slipping from her lips as naturally as if she'd known him forever. "You're not alone anymore." With careful steps, Emily and her mother guided the dog back toward their home. The dog moved slowly, but with each step, his strength seemed to return a little more. Emily stayed right by his side, her small hand resting on his back, as if to reassure him that they were in this together. As they walked, Emily couldn't help but wonder who had left him here. Who could be so heartless as to abandon an animal like that? But there was no time to dwell on that now. They needed to focus on getting Brave to safety, and Emily knew that no matter what it took, she would do whatever she could to make sure he never felt alone again. The path back to the house seemed longer than it ever had before, but Emily didn't mind. She felt a new kind of strength in herself, a sense of purpose that burned bright and steady. With each step, she knew they were getting closer to warmth, to safety, to a future where Brave would no longer be bound by anything except the love and care he deserved. The walk back to the house seemed endless, each step sinking deeper into the snow, as if the earth itself wanted to delay them. Emily could feel the weight of the dog leaning on her, his body cold and fragile, but she wasn't going to let him down now. Her mother stayed close behind, offering her quiet encouragement, but Emily's focus was entirely on the dog, Brave as she had already come to think of him. She couldn't let go of the feeling that they had to hurry, that every second counted. Brave's legs wobbled beneath him, and more than once, Emily had to gently steady him with her hands. He was so weak, struggling just to stay on his feet, yet there was a quiet determination in the way he moved. He wanted to keep going. That spark in his eyes, the trust he had placed in her, kept Emily going no matter how exhausted she felt. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the back door of their house. Emily's mother hurried ahead to open it, and as soon as the door swung wide, Emily quickly guided Brave inside. The warmth hit them like a wave, and for the first time since they'd found him, Emily felt like they were in a safe place. It was a simple home, but in that moment, it felt like the only place that mattered. "Mom, let's get him to the living room," Emily said, her voice filled with urgency. "We need to warm him up fast." Her mother nodded, helping Emily lead Brave to the couch. Emily carefully helped the dog lie down, his body still trembling as he collapsed onto the soft cushions. She pulled a thick blanket from the back of the couch and draped it over him, tucking it in gently around his body. Emily could see that Brave was exhausted, his eyelids heavy as he closed his eyes, but even in his weariness, he seemed to find comfort in the warmth of the house. His breathing, though still shallow, began to steady. Emily sat down beside him, resting her hand on his fur, feeling his body slowly relax beneath her touch. Her mother moved to the kitchen, but Emily's focus remained entirely on the dog. She had never felt such a strong desire to protect another living being. And now, in this quiet moment, she knew she was going to do everything in her power to make sure Brave was safe. She would be the one to show him that he wasn't alone anymore. He had been left in the cold, but now he would have a place to call home. As she sat there, watching Brave settle into the warmth of the living room, Emily realized just how much she had already grown. The little girl who had walked into the woods that afternoon, carefree and innocent, had become someone different, someone with purpose, with strength, and with a heart full of love for this dog who had been abandoned and forgotten by the world. "I'll never let you go, Brave," she whispered, more to herself than to the dog. "You're safe now." Her mother returned a few minutes later, a cup of warm broth in her hands. "I called the vet," she said softly. "They're expecting us. We need to get him checked out as soon as possible, but for now, let's give him a little time to rest." Emily nodded, feeling a mix of relief and worry. Brave still had a long road ahead of him, but he was no longer out there alone, shivering in the snow. He was here, in their home, surrounded by warmth and love, and that was all that mattered for now. By the time the vet arrived, Brave had begun to show signs of improvement. He was still tired, still weak, but the warmth of the house seemed to be working its magic. He had stopped shivering, and his breathing had become deeper, more rhythmic. Emily stayed by his side, her small hand gently stroking his fur, unwilling to leave him for even a moment. She knew that for now, it was up to her to make him feel safe, to make him feel loved. Her mother paced the living room, making phone calls to the local animal shelter and checking with the vet to ensure Brave's condition was stable. As soon as the vet arrived, Emily watched intently as he examined the dog. He was kind and gentle, speaking softly to Brave as he checked his pulse, temperature, and overall condition. "He's lucky you found him when you did," the vet said, his voice warm but serious. "If he'd stayed out there much longer, he might not have made it. His body temperature was dangerously low, but I think he'll pull through." Emily let out a sigh of relief. She knew Brave wasn't completely out of danger, but hearing that he had a fighting chance made her heart swell with hope. She felt her worry melt away, replaced with a deep sense of pride. The little dog who had been so broken and abandoned was now safe, thanks to her. "Thank you," Emily whispered, her voice barely above a whisper, as she placed her hand on Brave's head. "Thank you for not giving up." The vet smiled at her, impressed by her maturity. "You did a good thing, young lady," he said. "It's rare to see such compassion in someone so young. He's lucky to have found you." As Brave rested, Emily's mother sat beside her, gently rubbing her back. "We'll do everything we can for him, sweetie," she said softly. "And once he's strong enough, we'll figure out what to do next." But Emily had already made up her mind. She couldn't bear the thought of Brave being sent to a shelter or being alone again. There was no way she could let that happen. She knew deep in her heart that this was the dog she was meant to care for. This was her new best friend. It wasn't long before word of Emily's rescue spread through the small town. Neighbors, who had always known her as a shy and quiet girl, were suddenly talking about the brave little girl who had found the frozen dog in the woods. People started stopping by, bringing food, blankets, and toys for Brave. Some even offered to help with vet bills. The whole town seemed to rally behind Emily and her new friend, showing support in ways she hadn't expected. Emily felt overwhelmed by the outpouring of kindness, but it also made her heart swell. She realized that this little act of courage, saving a dog in need, had brought the community closer together. Everyone from the elderly lady next door to the mailman was talking about Brave and how Emily had saved him from certain death. It was as though the town had found new hope in this unexpected story of compassion. For Emily, though, it was all about one thing: Brave. As she sat beside him on the couch, watching him slowly recover, she knew her journey with him had only just begun. No matter what happened next, they would face it together. And that was enough. The days that followed were filled with small victories. Brave, though still weak, had a glimmer of hope in his eyes that made Emily's heart swell. Every time she looked at him, she saw a little more strength, a little more life. He was no longer shivering uncontrollably, and his once-icy fur had started to feel warm again. The steady care of Emily and her mother, combined with the warmth of the house, seemed to be working wonders. Each morning, Emily would greet Brave with a soft pat on his head, whispering words of encouragement. "You're doing great, Brave. Just a little longer, and you'll be back to running around in no time," she would say. And though he still moved slowly, his eyes would light up whenever she spoke to him, his tail giving a faint wag. The vet had recommended a slow, steady recovery plan, and Emily took it to heart. She made sure to follow every instruction, from giving Brave the special food to keep his strength up to administering the medications. At first, Brave had been hesitant about eating, his body not quite trusting the nourishment, but slowly he began to show interest. It started with a few hesitant licks, then a full meal, and soon he was eating as if he had never been hungry before. Her mother had set up a small bed for Brave in the living room, right near the fireplace. It was his safe place, where he could rest and feel the warmth of the fire while being surrounded by the sounds of family life. Emily spent every moment she could with him, whether it was reading stories aloud, gently massaging his legs, or just sitting with him while he dozed off. She knew that the journey of recovery wasn't going to be quick or easy, but she also knew that it was worth every second. One morning, a week after Brave had been brought into their home, Emily woke to the sound of scratching at the door. Her heart skipped a beat. She rushed to the door, her pulse racing, and opened it to find Brave standing, a little unsteadily, but very much on his feet. "Brave, you're standing," Emily exclaimed, her voice filled with joy. Brave's tail wagged tentatively, and he took a few shaky steps forward. Emily couldn't contain her excitement. She crouched down beside him, her hands gently supporting his body. "You're doing it, Brave! You're walking again." With a cautious but determined step, Brave took another few steps, each one stronger than the last. Emily stood up, watching him carefully, but allowing him to find his own rhythm. "You're so brave," she whispered softly, smiling through her tears. Her mother, who had been watching from the kitchen, came over and knelt beside them. "Look at him, Emily. He's making amazing progress." The small living room, filled with warmth and love, became a symbol of Brave's recovery. Every day, he grew stronger, both physically and emotionally. His eyes, once filled with fear and uncertainty, now sparkled with trust and affection. He had begun to form a bond with the entire family, especially with Emily, who had been there from the very beginning. At night, Emily would curl up beside him, her arm resting across his warm body, and drift off to sleep with a sense of peace. She knew that no matter how tough the road ahead might be, she would always be there for him. Brave was not just a dog who needed saving. He had become a part of her life, a friend, a companion, someone she would always protect. Each morning, Brave's tail would wag a little more enthusiastically, and his steps grew steadier. It was no longer a matter of if he would recover, it was a matter of when. Emily knew that with each passing day, he was becoming the dog he was always meant to be. And that, to her, was the greatest gift of all. As Brave's strength continued to grow, so did the sense of community around him. It was as if the small town, which had once been a quiet, unassuming place, had awakened with a new sense of purpose. Everywhere Emily went, people would stop her to ask how Brave was doing. The news of the rescue had spread like wildfire, and it seemed as though everyone in town had come to care about the dog who had once been left for dead in the woods. Emily was often greeted with smiles, and some would even offer to help with Brave's recovery. One neighbor, Mrs. Collins, brought over a basket of homemade dog treats, while Mr. Jenkins, who lived 2 houses down, had offered to help build a small doghouse for Brave in the backyard. People stopped by, offering advice on training and care, but most importantly, they showed their support in the simplest ways, by checking in on Brave's progress and asking how they could help. Emily felt overwhelmed by the kindness. She had always known the people in her town, but this new outpouring of love and generosity made her realize just how much they cared for one another. It wasn't just about a dog, it was about the connection that bound them all together. Brave had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in a world that sometimes felt cold, there was warmth to be found in small acts of kindness. One afternoon, while Emily was walking Brave down the street, a group of children from her school ran up to her, excited to see the dog. "Is this the dog you saved?" One of the girls, Lily, asked with wide eyes. "He looks so much better now." Emily smiled, holding Brave's leash gently. "Yes, this is Brave. He's doing a lot better now." The children crowded around, petting Brave and asking questions. "How did you find him?" another boy asked. Emily took a deep breath, remembering the moment in the woods. "I found him all alone, tied to a tree, freezing cold. I couldn't leave him there. He needed help." "That's so brave of you," Lily exclaimed, her voice filled with admiration. Emily blushed, but she couldn't deny the warmth that filled her chest at the praise. It wasn't about being brave, though. It was about doing what felt right. It was about not standing by when there was something she could do. As the group of children continued to pet Brave, one of the older boys, Ethan, looked at Emily thoughtfully. "You know, I think Brave should be the official town mascot," he said with a grin. "He's a hero, just like you." The idea spread like wildfire, and soon, people in town were talking about how they could honor Brave and Emily's heroic rescue. The mayor even suggested holding a small ceremony to thank Emily for her courage and bravery. It felt surreal to Emily. How had a single act of kindness led to such a widespread outpouring of support? But more than anything, Emily was humbled by the way the town had come together. It wasn't just about Brave anymore, it was about something much bigger: the power of community, the importance of looking out for one another, and the idea that even small gestures of kindness could create ripples that reached far beyond what anyone could imagine. That evening, as Emily sat beside Brave on the couch, she thought about everything that had happened in the past few weeks. From finding him in the cold woods to the way the whole town had rallied around them, it was more than she could have ever hoped for. Brave was no longer just a stray dog. He was a part of their lives, a symbol of resilience and hope. And with each passing day, Emily felt her bond with him grow stronger. They were no longer just two beings trying to survive. They were a family. As the weeks passed, Brave grew stronger and more confident. His fur, once thin and patchy, had begun to thicken, and his eyes no longer carried the shadow of fear. He had transformed from a trembling, broken dog into a playful, energetic companion. His bond with Emily deepened every day, and the two were inseparable. Wherever Emily went, Brave was sure to follow, his tail wagging with joy at every new adventure. The town's love for Brave hadn't faded either. The ceremony to honor Emily's rescue of Brave had been a simple yet heartwarming event. The mayor gave a short speech, praising Emily's courage and kindness, and the community presented her with a small plaque engraved with Brave's name, a reminder of the impact one person's actions could have. Brave, of course, had stolen the show, his wagging tail and playful energy winning over everyone who attended. But despite the recognition, Emily never wanted any of the spotlight. It had never been about that for her. It had always been about doing the right thing. As Brave's recovery continued, she realized that they had both been given a second chance, a chance to heal, to love, and to build something beautiful together. One Saturday afternoon, Emily and Brave took their usual walk through the town park. It had become their routine, a time for them to explore and enjoy the world around them. The park was filled with families and children playing, and the air was crisp with the first signs of spring. Emily couldn't help but smile as she watched Brave run ahead, his legs strong and sure now, his tail held high with excitement. "Look at you," she said softly, watching him as he bounded through the grass. "You're like a whole new dog." Brave stopped for a moment, looking back at her, his eyes filled with the same trust and affection that had first sparked their bond. He trotted back to Emily, nudging her gently with his head, as if to say, "I'm ready for whatever comes next." A few moments later, they sat down on a bench near the edge of the park. Emily let out a contented sigh, her heart full as she watched Brave sniff the air, his nose twitching with curiosity. He was happy. They were both happy. And it wasn't just because of the love they shared, but because they had both found a place in the world where they belonged. It wasn't long before they were joined by some of the children from the neighborhood. Lily, the same girl who had admired Brave weeks ago, came running up with a big smile on her face. "Hey, Emily. Hey, Brave," she called, her eyes shining. "We're planning a little get-together for Brave this weekend. A welcome home party. Would you like to come?" Emily smiled, feeling the warmth of the community wrap around her like a comforting embrace. "Of course we'll come," she said, glancing down at Brave, who was now wagging his tail enthusiastically. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow across the park, Emily couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in such a short amount of time. The shy, quiet girl who had once wandered the woods alone was no longer the same. She had found strength within herself, and in doing so, had given Brave a chance at a new life. Together, they had become a symbol of resilience, love, and hope, not just for themselves, but for the entire town. Brave had found his family in Emily, and Emily had found her purpose in rescuing him. It was a partnership, a bond, built on trust and love, one that would last a lifetime. As they walked home that evening, Emily's heart swelled with pride. She had given Brave a second chance, but in doing so, he had given her something just as precious in return. A sense of belonging, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always the possibility of a new beginning. And for Emily and Brave, that was enough. Together, They had created their own story, one that would continue to be written with every new day, every new adventure, and every new step forward.